Well, I'm so excited to welcome you all here today to this Innovator Showcase on a topic that we care very much about, the topic of reducing nutrients from our watersheds. And so this is a really important topic for us here in Illinois because we have the Mississippi watershed running across our border. And we, at Current, being headquartered here in Chicago and Illinois, we care a lot about solving Illinois' persistent water issues. And in this case, it's one where our challenges here in the agricultural heart of Illinois create big problems downstream, and they create big problems for our communities and ecosystems and economic activity in the Gulf of Mexico as well. So Svetlana Taylor, you'll hear more from her about the kind of shape and contours of the nutrient issue. But as is true to form for Innovator Showcases, we're here to bring you solution providers, people who have come up with really exciting and interesting ways of tackling this problem, which is not purely a technical solution that we are looking for. We're looking for policy solutions, finance solutions, market-based solutions. There's lots of things that we need to do to address this challenge. And I'm very excited to have three terrific entrepreneurs here today from the Freshwater Trust, from Gybe, and from ConserWater Technologies. So we're going to hear more from all of them in just a minute, but I'm going to give you a brief overview of what we're up to here at Current first. Let's see. George, go ahead. Thanks. Great. So Current is Chicago's water innovation hub. We are a small nonprofit organization headquartered here in Chicago, and we're powered by the partnerships we have with universities, with startups like those that are going to be presenting today, with large companies that have a stake in Chicago's water future, and with the utilities that are every day providing clean drinking water for us and also treating our storm and wastewater. Next, George. Our mission is to grow Chicago and Illinois' blue economy and build solutions to solve the world's persistent water challenges. So the blue economy definition for us means we're working both on the supply and the demand side of technology. We're trying to bring the people with solutions together with those that really need to find those solutions and deploy them to solve these pressing challenges in water. Next, George. The way that we do that is through events like this, where we're cultivating an ecosystem of water leaders across sectors. So there's more than 100 people coming into this event today from civic organizations, utility leaders, industry partners, from all over. And that's because these are complex problems and they're not solved by one sector alone. So when we bring folks together, the next thing we do is often figure out ways to accelerate development and deployment of innovative water tech. So we do that through pilot projects, and through various commercialization efforts that we're doing with the startups and companies that are in our orbit. Next, George. This is how we measure our impact. So Current as a hub tries to broker funding and resources to bring to bear on these water issues. We help to commercialize water technologies. We're building a 4,000 plus strong network of cross-sector water leaders. We're constantly evaluating what's promising technology and trying to track and share that in a database. And we're also deploying pilots like H2 Now Chicago, which is our Chicago River water quality monitoring project. And we're working to develop nutrient projects, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Next. This is just a snapshot of some of our industry and research partners. Next, George. And we're really excited today to be welcoming two brand new startup partners into our orbit, Storm Sensor and Cyclopure. So these are two innovators that we focused on in prior Innovator Showcases, and they have joined on to be part of our sort of umbrella and big logo wall of leading startups in water. And we're really excited to welcome and feature Storm Sensor and Cyclopure and work with them in the year to come. Next. Some of what Current offers is this database, as we said. We have a water tech database where we put startups that are part of this Innovator Showcase today and others that we find through our constant search and scan efforts into this database to identify what's the right tech to solve the persistent challenge. We also have a research site where we connect researchers to funding opportunities into industry. Next, George. And we've recently launched a pilot with a partner, Halo, which we're excited is also a Chicago-based startup. And Halo is a collaboration platform for open scientific innovation. And it's a really exciting way for industry companies that are looking to solve a particular water challenge with scientists from universities and startup to solve them. And so it's a really smart, seamless way to put an RFP up on the site, connect with interesting researchers that are engaged in your topic, and build that community to solve create and solve a pipeline of water issues over time. So I'll share more about that at the end, but the RFP with HALO is now part of our offering to our potential corporate partners. And so we're really excited to be working with HALO on that. Next, George. And finally, we're really excited about our big first week of water, Chicago's first week of water, Chicago Water Week, coming up starting September 28th through October 2nd. This is 5 days, and I think we're up to 20 plus virtual events and hundreds of cross-sector water leaders. So this is really an exciting opportunity that we found to leverage this moment that we're all in when everything is virtual, to just bring together and feature the big tent of water leadership here in the city of Chicago. So you can scan the code right in front of you if you want to go straight to the website. We will also be sharing out the public launch, but we're previewing here with all of you today. The program will be very excited to be sharing more about that in the days ahead. But stay tuned, mark your calendar, and get ready to register for a lot of great events in Chicago's first week of water. Great, next, George. And now I'm really excited because what we are about is building this network to introduce one of our closest partners, Eben Kyriakos from ChicagoNEXT, which is an initiative of World Business Chicago. And Eben's been a partner on the Innovator Showcase series since the very first one. Really excited to have him back to share the latest from ChicagoNEXT. Eben?
Thank you, Lena, and thank you so much, Current, for inviting us to be part of this really awesome Innovator Showcase series. And it was really essential to market why Chicago leads as a hub for technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. My name is Eben Kyriakos. I'm the director of ChicagoNEXT at World Business Chicago. WBC is the City of Chicago's economic development organization chaired by the mayor. And ChicagoNEXT is WBC's dedicated initiative in driving inclusive growth and opportunity for our city's tech economy and innovation ecosystem. We manage a portfolio of programs with our council members, and we're proud to say that we have over 200 council members, including Current, that are working together to drive tech economy growth in our city. The two priorities and kind of two big Elena, can you hear me now?
Yep, got you back. Oh.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now, Elena?
Yeah, you're perfect.
Okay, well, sorry for the disruption, everybody. But the two things I want to highlight here is Think Chicago, which connects our university students with local technology companies. So if you're a tech company looking for STEM talent in our city, please feel free to contact me or visit www.thinkchicago.net. We're leading a series of virtual events in partnership with our local universities to make sure we connect students with hiring opportunities here in 2020. And something to be announced this fall is a new initiative to really ensure that we're supporting our venture-ready Chicago startups. And so originally we're supposed to do the Chicago Venture Summit in 2020, which is the city's flagship VC conference. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we had to move it to 2021. But this fall, we're announcing a brand new startup growth program to support those startups that are post-seed looking for a Series A or Series B in 2020 and 2021. Well, I have my contact info at the end of this showcase, but please contact me if you want to be part of that new initiative. We're excited to launch that with our major innovation hubs, VC firms, and the mayor's office later this fall. And that's everything from ChicagoNEXT.
Great. So excited to hear more about that and to work with you on the Venture Summit 2021 and the Startup Growth Program. All very exciting. Thanks for being part of this. And World Business Chicago, of course, was a founding sort of launch partner for Current. Really excited to have this partnership continue to grow. All right. Next up, I'm really very happy to be introducing Svetlana Taylor, who's Current's technical program director, and she has been helping to really lead and steward Current's entire nutrient program. So this Innovator Showcase is part of a series of events that we're going to be doing. There's a second showcase series event focused on insight sensors for nutrient reduction that's coming up. So pay attention to that. We hope to see all of you there. But we are also soon to be releasing a report from the Illinois Nutrient Trading Initiative that we are working on in partnership with the University of Chicago's Environmental Law Clinic. That lays out, as I said, all the different dimensions of why it's so difficult to address this challenge here in Illinois. Beyond the technical, the policy, the finance, like what it's taken to try to think through how we would get a robust market for nutrients. But Svetlana is really here to give you an overview of the overall problem and why we've chosen the technologies and solutions to present to you today. Svetlana, over to you.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Elena. And hello, everybody. And thank you for stopping by our Innovator Showcase. So why do we care about nutrient pollution? And as Elena mentioned in the beginning, here in the US, we're dealing with a huge environmental and economic problem created by nutrients, which is Gulf hypoxia zone. And it's the largest dead zone in the US and the second largest in the world. Excess nutrients brought to the Gulf of Mexico by the Mississippi River each spring cause massive algae blooms, and subsequent algae die-off consumes all oxygen, creating a dead zone where few animals can survive. The size of this zone fluctuates every year, but as you can see here on this graph, the 5-year average has been way above the target size. And Illinois is the second largest contributor, and in some studies the first, of nutrients, and naturally we should care about solving this issue. Next, please. The sources of nutrients are typically divided into point and non-point sources. The point sources are the water resource recovery facilities, and the non-point sources are agricultural and urban runoff. When Illinois nutrient loss reduction strategy was released in 2015, over 80% of nitrogen pollution was attributed to agricultural runoff, whereas phosphorus load was equally split between point sources and agricultural runoff. Next, please. The approaches to reducing nutrient pollution are strikingly different between point and non-point sources. In point sources, the amount of nutrients exiting the facilities is monitored, and the effectiveness of the technologies can be controlled, thus the regulatory approach. In the case of non-point sources, it is difficult to monitor and control the effectiveness of best management practices. Therefore, nutrient loss reduction from non-point sources has so far been accomplished through voluntary and incentive-based programs. Next, please. But there is another approach, market-based approach. It works effectively when tight regulations push utilities to a place where implementation of additional technologies and processes becomes extremely costly. And utilities are then willing to invest outside the fence into non-point source measures to achieve nutrient reductions that they can take credit for. In 2018 and 2019, as Elena mentioned, Current has explored the feasibility of phosphorus trading program in Illinois. The participants' consensus was that the regulatory conditions were not yet in place to implement such a program. However, other issues have also come to the forefront, such as lack of confidence in the effectiveness of best management practice selection and performance. This is largely a scientific and technological issue. So Current went on to identify the latest and emerging technologies that can address it. Next, please. Two of these technology types are in situ nutrient sensors and analyzers, which will be the focus of our next Innovator Showcase, and artificial intelligence or AI-based technologies, which we will hear about today. Next, please. So for those not familiar with AI terminology, AI term was coined by John McCarthy in 1956 and refers to the ability of machines to simulate human intelligence. Machine learning is a subset of AI and refers to the computer algorithms designed to simulate human intelligence. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning and refers to the algorithms that simulate thinking processes in human and animal brains. The first deep learning algorithms were inspired by experiments done on cats. So this is a picture of my cat. The AI applications include expert systems, natural language processing, speech recognition, and machine vision. What makes AI work is data. Next, please. All Right, so all the technologies we're going to hear about today use satellite imagery as their data source. This slide just shows the amazing advances that have been made in satellite imagery technology, from the first black and white image that took 40 minutes to transmit to continuous real-time high-resolution imaging today. And the satellites have become cheaper and smaller in size, with the smallest about twice as large as the Rubik's Cube. Next, please. So the availability of large data sets, advanced software, and increased computer processing and storage capacity have all enabled AI to become a technology that can help us solve challenging problems of our time, including nutrient pollution. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for that overview, Svetlana. That was terrific. And at Current, we are looking at applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning for a wide range of water challenges, but we're really excited to talk about this one today. I'm gonna, with no further ado, turn it over to our first presenter, Alex Johnson, Freshwater Fund Director from the Freshwater Trust. And we are just so excited to learn about your Basin Scout platform today. Alex, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Elena, Svetlana, and everybody there at Current. We are very excited to be invited, have a great appreciation for what you do. Personally, it's nice to throw on a sport coat and pretend I'm somewhere other than my house. Before getting to the Basin Scout platform, just a quick thumbnail on the Freshwater Trust. We are now a 37-year-old nonprofit. We're headquartered in Portland, Oregon. For all of those years, we've been doing applied river restoration. Our focus is fixing freshwater ecology throughout the West right now, but really with a broader vision to getting to the nation and the world. As part of that mission, we have been building and testing new tools and technologies to improve the pace, scale, and effectiveness of conservation activities for at least a decade, I would say, in terms of our more technical work. And you know, in terms of AI, I think there's a couple of factors that we believe have been holding back the field of conservation from success, delisting rivers and completely fixing things. But certainly one of those is just the dizzying complexity and the rapid change that happens in any river system of any size. And so if we as a society are ever going to kind of get on top of that type of problem, we think AI and kind of the range of associated technologies is going to need to be part of the picture. It's just too complex to just throw human hours at. So we need to take advantage of big data, supercomputing, et cetera, and of course, AI. So that brings us to the Basin Scout platform. Next slide. Last year, we started a partnership with a longtime contractor of ours named Upstream Tech to collaboratively develop the Basin Scout platform. For a number of years, gosh, probably 7 or 8 years, we had used the moniker Basin Scout to apply to essentially all of the modeling of watersheds we were doing. And as we started doing a lot more of it, our analysts started automating the modeling that we did at a watershed scale. Upstream Tech, in conversations with us over a number of years, we kind of landed on an opportunity to build a platform that essentially used machine learning to rapidly automate the digitization of fields in a watershed, to automate the running of a number of publicly available models, to take in, you know, what those fields are growing, what type of irrigation is at each field, you know, the nutrient or the fertilizer regimens that was reported by those farmers, all of kind of the dizzying array of data that can be collected either by satellite imagery, but also from big data sets at USDA, USGS, et cetera. And so in terms of what the Basin Scout platform is now, it is essentially a big package of automated model runs and machine learning algorithms that essentially can crawl through existing data sets and satellite imagery, mash all those things together and batch process. So instead of looking at one individual field in a watershed that has thousands, we can look at all of those fields. We can model the benefits and challenges of different conservation activities on every single field, and from that create a really rich data set from which to build scenarios that get an entire watershed to a goal, as opposed to an individual farm or an individual field to a particular goal. And this is, really important for us as a conservation nonprofit. We've been doing a lot of good things over 37 years. We haven't fixed any rivers that we've been a part of. That's a problem for us. We don't want to just be in this work to do good work. We want to solve problems. And so figuring out what needs to happen on what scale, at what granularity, and then at what cost is key for us. And the Basin Scout platform helps us do that by building and running scenarios. And of course, updating those scenarios as new information becomes available. Next slide. So I touched on this a bit, but just to reiterate, we are using satellite data. We're using reported data from farmers, a range of different data sets. It differs based on watershed, as you would imagine. In some heavily agricultural watersheds, there's a lot more data. In some, there's less. And of course, there's a lot more agricultural complexity in, say, California, where we have a lot of programs on the ground versus the Midwest. So the data quality, I think, also varies based on the inputs, as you would expect. But I think what is exciting, no matter what the watershed is the near real-time updating that is now possible based on being able to observe cropping changes, irrigation changes, et cetera, and the ability to run many scenarios to figure out how to achieve conservation goals at what cost, et cetera, with a lot of different metadata, right? There's trade-offs for any scenario that you're going to want to run in terms of local jobs, in terms of groundwater infiltration versus surface water usage, et cetera. And so understanding those trade-offs, not just at the field level, but at the watershed level is really critical, we think, for achieving our conservation goals as a sector. Next slide. So in looking at, pretty colors, obviously it's challenging to bring you into the platform with just slides, but I think the notable thing for me, especially having been around at the Freshwater Trust for the past decade, is that we created maps like this 5 years ago, except it was all GIS analyst time, digitizing by hand every farm field, figuring out, overlaying records that we had and figuring out what was being grown where and what irrigation practices, usually just with people's eyes, what irrigation practices were being used. This is Solano County in the lower Sacramento, and every field has now been digitized using machine learning algorithms. And that is a huge step forward for us. And it allows us to start to think about a very cost-effective and speedy process of taking this platform and dragging and dropping it into new watersheds, especially watersheds that are less complex than Solano, which is the vast majority of watersheds in America. Next slide. So as I noted, you can build scenarios. If you squint and zoom in, you can see some of the things that you put in to a scenario here. Essentially, there are 5 or 6 different objectives that you are able to choose. Overall water usage, groundwater infiltration, reduction in phosphorus runoff, reduction in sediment runoff, reduction in nitrogen runoff. As folks on the call likely know, those things are related, those last 3, but they're not perfectly aligned. So sediment and phosphorus and nitrogen, often travel as a bundle, but some things that you can do on farm are better for phosphorus or better for nitrogen, et cetera. Also temperature. We have set up market-based solutions for temperature reductions by quantifying the shade benefits. And so then you can also look at specific crops or all crops in a watershed, and then specific conservation actions. So we're looking at irrigation upgrades from flood to pressurized or from pressurized to drip. We're looking at conservation tillage. We're looking at cover cropping, reduced fertilizer usage. You name it, all of those things are modelable using publicly available models that NRCS and USDA has been working on for a long, long time. Really, our innovation is automating those things. And so once you automate, you can rerun and rerun and rerun and understand the range of potential upside and downside from all of those different activities. They all have different costs. They all have different benefits and impacts. Next slide. So from that, instead of the colored every field in a basin, on the left you see you only have specific fields highlighted for this particular scenario, and that's the point. Looking at a watershed is very challenging if you don't have the insight into which farmers you should be recruiting, if you are in our shoes. And if you don't know which farmer to recruit, then you generally just start working with the farmers that are already raising their hands. I think from over 3 decades of doing that work, we sadly have found the folks raising their hands are generally not where the most impactful conservation activities need to go. And so we need to come at this from the total opposite direction of exactly who do we want to work with and how much is that going to cost. And in that way, we should be able to make much bigger strides towards an overall conservation goal, as opposed to just recruiting, whoever walks in the door first. And then on the right, you'll see that's one single field. And if you squint and zoom in again, there's, 8 or 9 different conservation activities or combinations of activities that have been modeled for that single field. And each one of those has a different benefit to phosphorus reduction, nitrogen reduction, groundwater infiltration, and it has a different cost. And so that's, all of those are, wrapped up in every single field. And then you can start to daisy chain the most cost-effective action on every field. You daisy chain all the fields together and you can get the most cost-effective scenario. And then as fields naturally change in terms of what they're growing and what irrigation they're using, outside of any movement on our end, you can start to adapt those scenarios to match up with reality, as opposed to working on a plan that you created 6 years ago and is out of date as soon as it got printed and put on a shelf. Next slide. This is just a quick demonstration of how you can compare scenarios. So as I said, it's not like any one scenario is the right one often. There may be the least cost scenario, but that doesn't mean it's the best, because maybe it decreases groundwater infiltration, and that's a real big deal in the place where you're working. So the nutrient reductions may not be worth the groundwater infiltration reductions. So that has 2 different scenarios, as you can see, getting compared against each other, both with the same cost cap, for example, of $2 million. Next slide. And so I think I've touched on this. I mean, essentially, we see huge opportunities here and already are putting those into practice. We are project managers, implementers, program managers, et cetera, on, as a lot of what we do. So the tools are really just to support those. We want to reach conservation goals as opposed to do good work. We want to improve resiliency, and we think, in terms of the sale of a improved watershed, a more resilient watershed, this type of platform dramatically improves the ability of decision makers, be they in municipal governments, at utilities, flood control districts, to look at non-point source or natural infrastructure actions as a group and compare it in apple-to-apples manner with gray infrastructure solutions, right? This is a whole industry that has been solving problems with gray infrastructure, and they've been doing it really well. But there hasn't been a way for natural infrastructure to kind of work into that channel. And so this type of platform allows a decision maker to compare, to cost, and to understand the reality of what they can do in their watershed. Next slide. So these are some applications that we found. Notably, we are using this stuff for water quality trading, for compliance with the Clean Water Act, nutrient sediment reductions, groundwater sustainability. Notably, we have a soon-to-be-announced corporate partner that is funding the configuration of the Basin Scout platform to the entire Sacramento Basin, which is more for a corporate sustainability goal. So there's a wide range of things that this type of platform can support. Next slide. And then in terms of customers, we already have quite a few. As I mentioned, corporate sustainability can use this. I think now that we've automated everything, kind of the price has come down, and so it's more viable for corporate sustainability. Previously, it's really compliance. It's regulated entities, water agencies, et cetera. We also see a role, especially if any of you are out there, for the right type of philanthropist. We think that major philanthropy can play a huge role here in essentially paying for the configuration of these types of tools to a watershed, because having this configured can then be catalytic for coordinating funding that already exists, but is otherwise kind of getting sprayed around the watershed without much prioritization. So we're already working with some folks like that in some specific basins. We certainly see how either major philanthropy, federal government grant making, et cetera, could essentially advance this much faster than your normal buyers, but all those things can work in conjunction. And last slide. I appreciate your time. There is a website right there, basinscout.org, where we hopefully have a lot of answers to your questions. There's also a video walkthrough, so you'll be able to get to see how this looks like when you are live zooming around on a web map. Really appreciate the opportunity and look forward to discussion and questions. Thank you again, Alex. Bye.
Thanks, Alex. So we do have quite a few questions in the chat. It's great, and keep them coming, folks, because if we don't get to them, I want to keep us moving so we can recover some time. But I wanted to ask, so there was a question about the source of your satellite data for Basin Scout, federal versus commercial, specific sensor types. What emerging information are you interested in capturing for sort of the next gen build out of this?
Yeah. I mean, as you'd assume, we built it with more publicly available, like federal satellite imagery, and we're essentially testing the privately available data. So I probably don't have to run through a list of private satellite data imagery providers, because there's not so many of them. But we have ongoing work with all of them to see who hits the right granularity versus cost mark to feed those data in as inputs to our models.
Fantastic. Great. So then there was another question. I think that you've kind of gotten at some of the regulatory issues and drivers here. But there's a question about simulation models that you're using, and you talked about this in some depth, but are there any other public domain models you'd want to mention? Any more specificity about the simulation models you're using there?
Yeah, we use the primarily the nutrient tracking tool. We've been able to automate, and we're leasing more server space so that we can batch process, tens of thousands as opposed to hundreds of field runs. The nutrient tracking tool we think is a pretty good one for this type of work, and it's had hundreds of thousands of runs over the last decade. Because it is a supported model by USDA. On the temperature side, we use a model called Shadolator, which quantifies temperature benefits. And we have automated in the past and are looking at kind of the cost versus benefit of bringing things like Apex, the base model, Sisal, SWAT Plus. I mean, every one of these essentially has pros and cons in terms of how much data exists locally, how much it's been used, what types of conservation activities it can bring in. So the primarily nutrient tracking tool, but essentially any model that has been configured and used enough should be automatable and pulled into the platform. We just have to figure out if it's worth the time and money to do so.
Great. So there's a few other questions. I'm going to direct you to the chat, Alex, and see if you can answer some in the chat while we're turning to our next presenter. Thank you so much. Thanks to Basin Scout and all the great work you're doing with the Freshwater Trust. Great. So now we're turning to Ivan Lalovich, who's the CEO and founder of Gybe. Ivan, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Alana. Thanks, Alex, also for the discussion about conservation efforts are really central. So Gybe is a startup company. We're also headquartered in Portland, Oregon, with a global distributed team. We are supported by Techstars in partnership with the Nature Conservancy, as well as Anheuser-Busch InBev through their 100+ accelerator. So very happy to be here and talk about what we do with regards to data services for water quality. Next slide, please. I won't spend a lot of time talking about the problem. I think everybody on this call is very in tune with water pollution impacts. I will highlight, in addition to the economic impacts and the food production impacts, there are major health and mortality issues globally relating to water quality. They're typically ignored. In fact, more mortality is attributable to water pollution than all crime and wars combined. So it's a pretty staggering impact. Global issues, obviously not evenly distributed around the world. Some areas pretty acute, others sliding by for now, but certainly something that we need to address. And business as usual is not going to get us where we need to go. Next slide. One of the main challenges that we address is that the way that people assess or understand water quality or pollution issues is by local point measurements. Typically, those are done either by taking water samples, sending them to a laboratory, which are typically very precise methods. However, the spatial domain, or the amount of space there is to cover, and the temporal domain, how variable water quality is in time and location, is pretty significant, and it's really difficult to sample using either water sampling or even automated in situ instruments that provide data continuously. So it's a major challenge to obtain information about how effective management practices or conservation efforts are at large watershed scales. Next slide. So I'll talk about what we do, which is we provide data as a service for water quality, and we do that by combining a proprietary sensor technology, which looks looking at the surface of the water, so installed pretty flexibly, either along the shore or floating platforms. That data stream is continuous and is interpreted by our algorithms and combined with satellite imagery. So we combine kind of the best of both worlds of in situ local measurements, the scalability of those measurements using satellite data to a large watershed area, and then our algorithms produce essentially dynamic maps of different constituents or contaminants within the watershed. And I'll talk about what those are in a minute. Next slide. So really what we enable is the view of the big picture. This is San Francisco Bay. On the right-hand side is a satellite-derived product for sediment loads or turbidity in this particular case. And on the left-hand side is a NOAA standard product. So we have the ability to calibrate the quantities to values that are traceable to EPA standard measurement techniques. Provide hundreds of thousands of data points, and you can really understand what the dynamics are looking like, what's happening where and where. So the satellite data is provided every day to 5 days, depending on the satellite source, the satellite data provider. The sensor data is available every 5 seconds, although the actual acquisition rates are much higher. Next slide. Excuse me. So what our customers get are a combination of layered data maps. So these are the kind of maps that have hundreds of thousands of data points of different water quality constituents that are quantifiable. And on the right-hand side are time series data. So data of single point, very high time domain data. So a lot of time samples every 5 seconds at specific locations where sensors are installed. And next slide. And so what do we measure? So we really don't measure anything directly. We're looking at the optical signal that's leaving the water, and we're inferring what's there. The kinds of things we can distinguish directly are phytoplankton, which was mentioned at the beginning of the call. Geophysical parameters like sediments or turbidity. We use turbidity even though it's a poorly defined parameter. It's how cloudy the water is due to a variety of things that are suspended, particulates that are suspended in water. And then nutrients. CDOM has got a very direct optical signature. So all these have optical signatures that we can directly observe and relate to quantities. We also, I think as Alex alluded to, there are couplings between things that float or travel in water to things that don't have an optical signature, such as nitrates and phosphates or dissolved oxygen, which we can also relate to some of the other matter that is present through pigments. So essentially what we have the ability to do is detect a range or extendable set of parameters within water quality, spanning biology, sediments, and nutrients. And I'll go to the next slide. So just to give you an example of, slide before that, thank you. Just to give an example of some of our customers. So we're working very closely with the Nature Conservancy in the Mississippi Basin, as well as on the East Coast, North Carolina, looking at, in particular, both nutrients and harmful algal bloom concentrations, providing monitoring services to quantify the effects of various conservation initiatives or policy actions. We're working with Anheuser-Busch InBev to look at reservoir water quality and water supply. These two are linked. I'm happy to go into more detail on that effort. We're working with the U.S. Navy as well. They've got operational needs for water quality with regards to asset safety and vessel safety and trafficability and navigability in rivers and near coastal areas, and then water utilities like the city of Salem, which is the capital of Oregon. And with that, I will open up to any questions. Very happy to be here and look forward to engaging with the audience.
Thank you so much for your presentation and being here for the showcase. The one question that did pop up, and then I'll let everybody else submit their questions in the chat, is what sensor density is needed?
Yeah, it's a really great question. The biggest application for us for machine learning and AI really is the fact that no watershed is the same. So the transportability, what we conclude in one watershed in terms of sensor density to get certain performance levels is not going to apply the same way to other watersheds. So typically what we guide customers to is install sensors at high value locations, either near inputs to particular utilities and installations such as drinking water utilities or hydropower facilities, or where they normally sample, where there's other instruments. We've been able to demonstrate a very good correlations to established methods, either USGS, continuous monitor, water quality monitoring stations, super gauges, or commercially available sondes that operate, that our customers operate. So yeah, it really depends on the watershed, the complexity, and the need for continuous data at that watershed.
Great, thank you. Ivan, thank you again for joining. And obviously, if there's any other questions for Ivan, please go ahead and feel free to put that in the chat so Ivan can answer directly. Just keeping count of time, we're going to get ready for our next presentation, which is with Adith Murthy, CEO and founder of ConserWater.
Hello, everyone. Hope that you can hear me.
Yes, perfect.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's an honor to present as part of this event with Current and ChicagoNEXT. And as was mentioned, I am the founder and CEO of ConserWater Technologies. And at ConserWater, we help farmers to grow more with less, with no sensors or hardware. Next slide, please. If you're wondering how I got here, a while back, when I was a kid, I used to live in Florida, and it was the first day of summer vacation, and I lived really close to the beach. So I decided to go to the beach, and this is what I saw. That time there had been a huge algal bloom, and I had to run back from the beach back to my house as fast as possible because I was so disgusted by how this thing looked. Then I started to think, why do we have to struggle with such issues even when we have such great technology even in the 21st century? And eventually came out ConserWater over the years. Next slide, please. At ConserWater, our idea is to use AI to help farmers to grow more healthy crops with fewer resources. That means less water, less electricity, less fertilizer, and in order to keep the incentives aligned for the farmers to do this, less money for them when they save all of these things. Next slide, please. And that equates to over 30% in water savings, 10 to 20% in nutrient savings. And just to give you some context, just the water savings could be like hundreds of dollars per acre per year, especially in places like California where water is relatively scarce. And then nutrient savings can add up to thousands of dollars per year. So we really try to tackle the problem of nutrients from two different angles. You can reduce nutrient runoff by reducing the amount of nutrients by making them efficient, but also by ensuring that less runoff happens, by helping the farmers to water and irrigate efficiently, use all of the water most effectively so that it's actually being used for their plants and it's not going off their fields, taking the nutrients away with them. And we are scalable worldwide because we have no installation, no hardware, and no sensors. And this is what we feel is truly needed to scale to every single farmer out there. We would want systems like this to be scalable to every single farmer so that we could actually see them all easily adopted and save significantly on water and nutrients. And if you're wondering how we do this, please switch to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. If you're wondering how we do this, this is how. We use over 100 satellites, all the way from ultraviolet to radio waves, over 100 public and private satellites with resolutions ranging all the way to up to 10 feet, and even revisits of satellite imagery up to 1 day, along with a host of local data, along with our proprietary AI, our geospatial deep learning and reinforcement learning to predict actionable parameters on the farm level. And for us, those actionable parameters mean things like the soil moisture level, nutrient levels, like what you'd get from sensors or from sampling the soil, those kinds of information. And it's essentially like having a sensor every 10 feet on your farm, but without any of the sensors or the hardware. And we're able to produce this just from satellites and other data using our proprietary AI. And based on this information, we are then also able to suggest to the farmer how much to water, how much to irrigate, how much to fertilize in order to be efficient. And in addition, since we have no sensors, no hardware, this can be scaled from a farm level. It's agricultural grade, so it's extremely accurate. It can be scaled from a farm level even to a district level, to all sorts of levels, to get a holistic picture at various levels of what stakeholders at various levels need to do to ensure that the water and fertilizer levels are ideal and not too much, not too less as well. Next slide, please. And this will definitely make you immediately compare us to some of the other systems you probably heard about, like soil moisture sensors. Soil sensors, they can also provide for you a good amount of input savings for the farmer and even daily information, but definitely they're more expensive, and they're also don't provide it to the same level of resolution that we do, unless of course you're one of the richest farmers who can afford to put a sensor every 10 feet. But 99% of farmers out there, they can't afford to put sensors at that level of resolution. And you might also compare us to soil samples. That's the common way farmers today try to understand how much their nitrogen they're using. That's how they report, by doing soil samples, sending them to a lab, and then understanding from the lab results what's happening. Now, ConserWater is trying to change that by enabling the farmers to know from the satellite data what are these nutrient levels on a very, very regular basis. And that regular basis, in the case of the soil moisture, it's every single day. We're able to give farmers with soil moisture information every single day in order for them to actively use it to manage their farm input needs. And with the nitrogen and phosphorus, it's every 5 days. It's still quite a significant turnaround time to enable them to do things on a very fast scale. Next slide, please. And farmers and various stakeholders can use ConserWater in 2 different ways. They can use it directly from our subscription dashboard, where they can get all of the insights in one place. And we have like over 1,000 farmers who have interacted with the subscription dashboard around the world. Or they could use it through the growing method, which is through partnerships, which use our APIs on the cloud. So open offer to anyone on this call, even especially Ivan and Alex. I think all of us could definitely collaborate to create much more powerful solutions. And this is the active way that ConserWater has been pursuing for a long time, which is by using our ConserWater APIs, which are easily integratable into any set of products to create all sorts of system integrations. And one of the common ones actually that farmers interact with is irrigation controllers and fertigation controller units. By buying these products and putting them on the farm, which already use the ConserWater API, they can fully automate their farm, stop worrying as much about irrigation and fertigation, and the system can take care of a lot of these things for them while minimizing their resource consumption, while maximizing their yields. And in the process, save them significant money and also solve huge problems around nutrient wastage and water wastage. Next slide, please. And just to summarize, we offer a wide array of services, some of which are starting from the most basic plant health and plant moisture powered by satellites on a weekly basis to our signature product, Moisture Focus, which is soil moisture to a 10-meter resolution by default, or up to 10 feet even, with no sensor installation, which is all designed to be like a drop-in replacement for a soil moisture sensors that farmer who's already aware with using sensors can immediately start playing with this and running. And going to the nutrient side, there's nitrogen focus and phosphorus focus, nitrogen and phosphorus information to a very high resolution and directly correlatable to the amount of fertilizer being applied and used by the plant in order to help farmers to grow more with less. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So in the near future, we really hope that farmers everywhere, every single farmer can engage in precision agriculture and start to grow more with less with technologies like ConserWater and enable us to solve the nutrient problem at scale. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. That was a terrific presentation. And I had a question in the chat from Marina that I think it's relevant to you, but it's actually relevant to everybody. And this is the question about how we translate between the data science and sort of artificial intelligence and satellite imagery community and the agribusiness community that is essentially your customer, who you're looking to sort of deploy this product with. So what have some of the challenges been, and how have you overcome them when you're explaining the utility of this technology to your customers?
Yeah, so definitely when you create any technology, you want to make sure that the stakeholders who are your customers, whoever your end users, end customers, it makes sense to them. And if you want the adoption to be reasonably fast, you also want to make it similar to something that they're already kind of aware of, so that there's not a huge learning curve associated with them trying to adopt it. If there's a learning curve, then you're going to have issues with making them learn how to use this and how this completely different technology can integrate into your things. So in our case, we've definitely tried to design our technologies to make it similar to what farmers are already aware of. So as you might have seen from the previous slide which I showed, which in the case of soil moisture, it's essentially trying to make the soil moisture information that you provide very similar to what they might get from a sensor. Thanks for switching the slide. Very similar to what they might get from a sensor. And in the case of nitrogen focus and phosphorus focus, make it very similar to the soil tests that the farmers have already been using for many, many decades to understand nutrient levels. And combine this all together in a way that's very intuitive for understanding. So another point, I guess, is making sure the user experience in the software itself is very conducive for farmers to easily go through the process and to understand what they need to do properly. And that can also come from the partnerships, which I mentioned, the API partnerships, working together with people who have lots of boots on the ground in different parts of the world to really understand what farmers are thinking in each part of the world to make this happen.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and a truly global challenge that's really resonating with lots of different communities. Yeah. So one final question for you. So is there a database you're using to calibrate the satellite data and for the water and nutrient values, and what are those? Question for me, Andrew.
Yeah. So that's a very, very good question. As you're probably familiar from the academics, I guess, if you're asking what databases is, everyone understands that there must be everyone understands the scientific concept that there should be some correlation between what satellite sees and what's in the ground. But the real question is, how do you calibrate that for every single location in the globe to make it scalable worldwide? And that's actually our unique offering, actually, is that calibration to every single location. Because there's so many factors that affect these things, the soil moisture, nutrients, there's so many factors, and they're all, many of them are local factors. Like, what is the crop growing? What is the soil condition there? How rough is the surface there? There's lots of local factors. What we're able to do at ConserWater is basically correct for all of those local factors by building localized models that are focused to specific, that's focused to your specific farm or whatever region you're interested in. And we're able to calibrate specifically on our own to that particular level. And that's how we're able to do this. So that's part of our proprietary AI that makes the magic happen. I'm happy to have a further conversation with you, Andrew, remotely, if you're interested.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of you. This was a really terrific set of presentations. I'm glad we were able to go a little bit deeper. George, you want to flip to the wrap? Yes. So this is our favorite part, how you can stay engaged with us. We had a terrific group on the line today, and we hope you'll all connect with each other. To stay engaged with us, make sure you're signed up for Current's newsletter. We'll keep you informed about other Innovator Showcases and other events that are coming up. We've got one right away on August 26th. That's going to be sort of the second in our nutrient series for the summer. This one will be about the in-situ sensors and analyzers for environmental monitoring. We've got another great lineup of presenters there. Reach out to George Brigandy, who heads all of our partnership work. His email address is on the screen if you'd like to collaborate with us on a future virtual event. So we are always taking ideas and building a pipeline of other showcase series events and other topics going forward. Next slide. Don't forget Shy Water Week, hashtag Shy Water Week. We're really excited about this. It's a first time effort. Lots of partners. We'll be building out the website continuously. You all get a sneak preview. Go ahead and start signing up. There are events. Many of them are free. Some of them have nominal charges. Others are big galas that water-focused nonprofits are running. So take a look and see what's out there. We're so excited about the big tent we've been able to build to showcase all of Chicago's incredible water leadership under the Shy Water Week banner. Next slide. And finally, I think this is contact info for Evan and for me. If you'd like to follow up on any of the immediate action steps that you heard from ChicagoNEXT or from Current. We also, if you are a foundation on the line, I think you heard many different opportunities to plug in to Freshwater Trust, to some of these other efforts underway. If you are a corporate partner on the line and are interested in getting engaged, both Evan and I have connections and contacts and ways we can talk to you further about the ways you can support this work. We are still seeking sponsorships for Shy Water Week. We are always happy to help our corporate partners achieve their sustainability goals. If you're a startup, we'll be in touch with you because we are trying to get as many of the needs assessment inventories of our startup community gathered as possible so that we can feature you in our database. We want to make sure we've got your company listed and that we understand the kinds of needs you're looking for, so we can connect you with investors in our community, incubators, accelerators, and just the broader community at large. So we're always trying to solve your problems. Same for our university partners. Get in touch with us if you've got research questions or projects you'd like to collaborate on to demonstrate broader impacts. We just are excited to continue to grow our problem-solving engine together. So thanks everyone for attending today. Really excited to keep this Innovator Showcase series going.